And welcome back to our very special MS Bill 2023 edition of Unpacking Endpoint Management. I'm your co-host, Danny Guillory. Steve Thomas. And with me is the great Danny Guillory. I'm using my awesome camera phone with its arm-based eye control, and I think it makes me look less scary on camera, ironically, due to technical difficulty. But other than that, I'm doing fine. Danny, what say you?
Oh my God, this is a live show, people. Live show. So, all good. How are you doing, Steve? I'm glad to actually see you here in St. Louis this time. Hey,
yes,
we got to get together while you're here.
And with us today are the dynamic duo of managing and servicing Windows in the cloud, Aria, Carley, and David Geyer. You know, it's actually been a while since we've talked about this topic on this particular show, believe it or not. I mean, I've listened to AMAs, I've participated in the Windows monthly office hours on the subject, but, Danny and I actually thought it was a good time to have this topic back on Windows Update, and in particular, all the innovations that have happened in the last 6 months, 12 months in the world of Windows Update for Business, or WOOFB. I think we even got a little mascot there for WOOFB. And, how customers can set it and forget it with Windows and managing Windows updates. Who came up with set it and forget it? Was that like an infomercial thing from years ago? Am I dating myself? I don't know.
I think
but
people try it with a bunch of stuff.
It's great to have Aria and David with us. And of course, as always, our adult supervision, Rochelle Blanchard, is here with us to help us stay on the rails, which I'm doing such a wonderful job of that right now. But
it's like HR is in the room. It's like, oh, wait,
yeah,
HR is here. Yeah. Everybody chill out.
Nonetheless, how are you, Aria? How are you?
Oh, fabulous. Regretting a little bit that we didn't give Rochelle, some duct tape or, a ruler or, something to help keep the peace ahead of the show. But
I try my best.
Here. Talking to some of my favorite people.
Excellent. How are you, David?
Life is good. Keeping super busy. Not only trying to ship our new drivers feature, but working on what the next big things are going to be and trying to get everything lined up so we can start getting the developers to start build that next new cool stuff. So it's always fun.
Did I hear drivers? What was that?
Yes, you did.
And breaking in the door early. It's not even 5 minutes in.
Well, I'm a newbie here, so I don't know all the rules. So I might make a mistake or two.
Now we're going to get more viewers. So it looks like we have our first question posted to Tech Community from Nathan. Our company has transitioned to Cloud WOOFB with rings. We've recently had 2 different drivers automatically update and break the key services the PCs provide. Neither driver can be found in the Microsoft Update catalog. Shouldn't everything that will automatically install be found in the MUC, hopefully by something found in the update logs? Who wants to take this one?
I think that crosses... Yeah, both of our areas. Not everything that is in Windows Update is in the update catalog. It's a good question about how deep we want to go into that. New systems versus old systems, I guess is the best way to touch on that. Almost everything is, though. And so that's pretty rare. There's also with drivers, there are a few things that are not necessarily in the update catalog. Certain plug and play drivers won't be there. There's another kind of driver. It's called an extension driver. Now, those are usually software extensions. I've never heard of those actually causing a system issue. So I'm guessing that's not what caused the issue in this case. But those won't be there. So there are some specific known exceptions. They should not be dangerous in any way whatsoever. And so the vast majority are on update catalog, but not every one of them.
I would also note that, well, yes, most drivers are published through Windows Update. There are some drivers that different OEMs, for example, might be pushing to devices through their own infrastructure and their own endpoint. And this is often where we see some of those issues. For example, if Lenovo or Dell or HP has a driver that they want to push right away to a device, they do have systems and the ability to do that. And so you might also be seeing a driver that went there that hadn't actually yet been posted to the Windows Update endpoint. But those are all things that, David is going to talk to us about how he's improving soon.
Thank you, Bob. It looks like we have more from Nathan. So thank you, Nathan, for all the juicy questions. The other question is, what can we do about problem drivers? I know we can stop all driver updates. I know we can micromanage driver updates currently without a GUI. I know we can continue to try to convince first level support at these companies who do not understand what we will manually install drivers that they need to fix their driver. What I wondered is, does or could Microsoft have a process for reporting driver update problems?
Brilliant question.
As you can tell by the rapid response. I think the answer is yes, there should. I'm not specifically sure if there is one. While we've been working on the driver process of management, though, of managing those drivers, I haven't actually been in direct contact with the team that does the driver ingestion myself, and so I don't know all of their processes. We have a Microsoft driver ship room. The drivers that come through Windows Update, they're submitted by the OEMs. They go through a certain amount of testing and validation. An awful lot of weight is placed on the OEMs themselves to do the driver's testing to validate or certify that they've done so. And then that process occurs before it is signed. And then when it's rolled out, it's done through a gradual process to try to detect issues before it's made available more broadly. So that part of the process is there. So I suspect there's some way to communicate issues in that process. I just don't happen to know what it is. You mentioned without a GUI, so it sounds like that you're part of the Windows Update for Business Deployment Service Graph API preview for driver management. We have a limited private preview with the GUI and Intune that's ongoing right now. And in that experience, you'll be able to find individual drivers and firmware updates and be able to pause just that one driver while leaving the other drivers that you've approved deploying to devices and keeping them as current as possible. So with driver policies in WFB in general, we continue to recommend an update ring strategy and have a policy where you have, 5% of devices, your early adopters, your IT folks that are getting those driver updates first. I don't know if you can still hear me because my screen just went completely black, but it sounds like maybe you can.
We can hear you.
All right, I'll just keep talking and pretending it's back. And you'll be able to manage those individual drivers, have the rings so that you can get that quality signal back, just like we recommend for quality updates and feature updates, and deploy those gradually. Because you may have unique software in your environment that interacts with the driver that may not be detected when we do a gradual rollout in the world. And so your unique situations, your unique hardware, your unique vertical applications are all good to get a little coverage and validation, just like any other update, because even the OEMs can't cover everything.
Well, yeah, and I'll just throw in some historical commentary there. For years, OEMs have had the capability and the option of leveraging our programs and leveraging Windows Update for the servicing of stuff. And lots of times, whether it was the process on our side or a variety of reasons, a lot of OEMs just did in runs and just basically made all their driver updates out of band and available on their sites. I haven't had this problem in quite some time because I've been on ARM devices exclusively for the last 2 or 3 years, whether it's the Surface Pro X or it's Lenovo, and all of that stuff comes automatically through Windows Update, and it's been a great experience. I haven't had to go hunt for any kind of driver updates, and everything worked perfectly, of course, until this morning when my camera started to fail. But I think that's a hardware problem actually. It's not a driver problem. So
David's screen went blank because he got a driver update.
I'm actually going to go check that out because it is a really good theory.
At least a video.
Well, you bring that up. We do it as a joke, but it actually, like, it's one of those things that we're taking a look at. In reality, is because there are certain driver updates, whether that happened to me or not, that can cause a blip when you're working. A Bluetooth blip, a video blip, a networking blip. All of those can be really disruptive to end users, especially non-technical end users who don't know what's going on. And so we're looking at ways to help try to manage when those drivers are actually installed. Like what would be awesome, Aria outside of active hours would be really cool. Subtle hint there.
So almost like you have a period where you should be able to install all of your updates and just say only install them at this time or during this period. Wouldn't that be great?
So when will this actually be available, Dave, in Intune?
We are really, really close. We are looking at right now next month, second half of next month is when we think it's going to be. I always caveat that with it's very much quality driven. So we have some of the last bits of engineering going in right now. The driver management portion has been in private preview for almost a year. Where we're finishing off right now is in reporting. So we're not releasing the feature without reporting in Intune that shows you which devices are receiving which drivers, where they are downloading, installing, if they have an error, an alert. We're having all that hooked up, and we're right now testing that internally and getting ready to release that to our private preview customers in about a week or two. And then assuming we don't find any showstopper issues, we're expecting then to release and make that available publicly to everybody in Intune second half of next month. Like I said, it's quality driven. So if we find something, it takes us a little while to fix it, then it could be delayed a little bit further. But that software, that's large scale integrated software across multiple organizations that is actually very new and innovative software. And so those things happen. Right now, I'm feeling pretty good. We're looking at a lot of little issues, not a lot of big issues, which is usually a sign that your quality effort is kind of starting to narrow down and drive towards a release point.
No, when you said it'll be available, shortly. If this was a hallway conversation, I would probably tell you, man, I've been here. I heard that last year too.
Well,
but rightfully so. We're both our feature PMs now. It's like, yeah, I've probably been saying the same thing about some of the features.
Well, I try to translate to customers. We give an approximate date, but in the end, we sell no wine before it's time.
That's right.
That was good. I'm gonna have to use that.
Yes.
Well, as a product manager, I'm all about trying to get value out to customers as soon as possible. Yeah. As a former test lead as well, I also know the other side of the coin and the other side of the story. So I work with my engineers very closely. I tell them, you tell me when it's ready to go, and I would rather ship a high quality product, a couple months or even 6 months late than ship garbage on time, because no one's going to remember that you shipped a little bit late, but everybody's going to remember when you shipped something that had a whole bunch of issues and bugs. So I'd rather be in that first group than the last group, more so for the customer experience and all of those reasons, because long term that's going to play out better for everybody. So I make sure that we have that at the top of our minds when we're having those conversations internally. That doesn't mean that we don't still ship a few bugs here and there. Software is what it is. But when you have the right mindset, it comes out a lot better.
It does. More time to cook, more better quality. Definitely.
Very much so.
So we have a couple of comments and a kind of embedded question from Mario. So number one, often WFB drivers are outdated versus what manufacturer releases. I understand that there's a certification process, but it seems very long. Number two, set it and forget it didn't work for us with a certain manufacturer's BIOS update. It bricked a bunch of devices where we had to stop the deployment. How can we improve this?
Ron Popeil, that was who came up with set it, forget it. It was the rotisserie chicken thing.
Take the blue pill. Take the blue pill, not the red pill.
All right. So on the first part on outdated drivers, so one of the things that happens there is I mentioned the gradual rollout process that we do with the world devices, the unmanaged devices, consumer devices, and other devices, where Microsoft releases to a few percentage at a time, gets some feedback or looks at telemetry, and then continues to roll that out. That's part of that delta between when a OEM has made that driver potentially available on the website and published it before you start to see it more broadly. I think I just got a confirmation yesterday from Ryan, who I work with on the deployment service team, that for enterprise management for our feature, those drivers should be available a lot quicker, within a week or so of being published by the OEM, if not faster. And that is because, again, I recommended update rings for drivers. And that's why. We're making the case that in enterprises, they can build up the testing layers themselves and be able then to validate drivers and quality, like these ones that potentially brick some devices, before they go out broadly in the organization. And so get them access to the driver sooner rather than later, because they can make intelligent decisions and validate software and components. And if they find an issue and the issue needs to be fixed, for example, in an internal app, they have a little bit more time to prepare that release, and so they can deploy that app update as well as the driver update together.
Okay, who wants a question that's not about drivers?
Depends on what it is about.
That's a good point.
Okay, so we've got a question from Johan. Delivery optimization is a crucial part of update delivery. Currently, the reports only give global statistics for groups, ISPs, or certain update groups, Windows Update, M365 apps, drivers, etc. Are there any further plans for delivery optimization, reporting, and diagnostic to, for example, to be able to drill down into the reports? To see like reports on computers at the PC level or detect issues within a group. I guess they're asking for more granular insights into delivery optimization. That would probably require a couple of different PMs. I mean, you guys want to take a stab at that? Or?
I'm really just happy that in my head I was thinking, oh, I'm so excited for a question that's not about drivers. And then the question was about reporting. Oh. And if there was a topic I could have picked that wasn't drivers that I didn't want to talk about, it would have been reporting. But
now they're going to roll in.
I think that is something that we can totally follow up with offline. And I think that it's a great point of how do we figure out better what we're doing, how do you see how we're doing it. And also, if you're not already using DOS policies, quick plug, you should be. Peer-to-peer caching, if you're using Windows Update for Business, is one of the best ways to ensure that you save your bandwidth.
So I'll break myself in jail just a tad here. I'll go into the police station, but not go into jail. But the DO is, I own a very small section of DO, and this is something I've heard about quite a bit. And we just haven't had the chance to really dig into it and see there. But DO is, I would say, integral, especially if anybody knows me. I'm a huge config man guy that turned into an Intune guy, but it, I would say it's pretty integral. Like if I was talking to a customer, DO is very integral into your management of content. I used to do a lot of DO talks, NMS, etc. But DO should be a part of your critical strategic plan when you're talking about content delivery. We do need to do a better job when it comes to reporting and monitoring of it, because yes, that question always happens. You can't execute an action with some type of monitoring or reporting behind it. It's just kind of fundamental core. So something we know about, we've heard. I can't say the voice is not loud because it is loud. Just lots of other bigger rocks to go deal with right now. But it's something we will tackle at some point. Can't tell you when. That's as far as I can pretty much go.
Thanks, Danny. Okay, we've got a question from Phil. This is part one. There is a company that I help with that needs some Windows Update assistance and improvement. They are mostly using WSUS, but their GPOs are incorrect in many ways. Old settings, incorrect settings, etc. Their WSUS seems unhealthy too. We want to modernize and simplify their updates. It seems to me that WSUS is out of style these days, and SCCM, which they use, just seems like too much to manage. Does anyone want to comment on that before I move on to the second part of Phil?
It's a great pitch. Totally agreed. What's the question?
Okay, let me go to part 2. WolfB seems to be the recommendation for an on-prem AD environment like theirs, but it really looks like they lose a lot of reporting capabilities. Sorry, Aria, for the trigger. Reporting is in this. We'd love to see if devices are behind on patches, like if the updates are failing. If we move to WolfB, do we lose these reporting capabilities? As far as I know, we could still use WSUS for reporting, but that seems messy. How do we simplify and modernize updates, but still have the reporting and statistic capability?
Great question. Also, reporting is not a trigger to me. I just want to clarify. It's just that our current reporting has room for improvement. And now to talk about the room for improvement that Danny is going to explain, Mr. Danny Gallery.
Wait, what a minute. What'd you just sign me up for?
You pointed to yourself. I was like, oh, Danny's got that.
The reporting is my trigger word because I, as much as I like reporting, man, it's so tough to deal with. But what I wanted to say about this one, though, it is more of a question for Aria and David. Like, there are still customers out there using WSUS, SCCM, and maybe you can talk about it later, but I always run into those customers for whatever reason, and they're trying to transition into the modern update space, and it's like they try it, they back out, they try it, they back out, they never really fully commit. So I don't know, maybe this is even an off screen conversation, but it just seems to be like back and forth. And I always wonder, like, if you guys looking at telemetry when it comes to updates. I find myself in the same challenge too sometimes when I'm dealing with customers. The first thing they pull up is group policy. I'm like, oh my God, I haven't seen that in years. What does that even do anymore? So, and they go back and forth and never really commit. So I don't know. It's just something in my head I've been meaning to talk to you guys about.
Yeah.
David, go ahead.
When moving to the cloud, legacy group policy objects is probably the number one problem customers face. Yeah. You really need to get a device clean relative to group policy and Windows Update. One of the key reasons is that Windows Update does not respect MDM over GP. And therefore, any group policies that are on the device will override any settings that Intune tries to set through CSPs and MDM. And so that just creates loads of frustration. Why is it not working the way I expect? Why is it not doing what it's supposed to be? And then, of course, group policy, there are so many different ways it can be applied on a device that figuring out not only clearing it once can be done, but then it comes back and you have to figure out where was that old system that configured that thing that puts that back on that device, and you have to turn that off as well. I don't envy that challenge. But once you get there, it enables you to do that step into Azure Active Directory, either through co-management or new devices, and then start to use the cloud-based management a lot cleaner. And then the other part was reporting, but I'll hold off on that in case we want to dig a little deeper into that.
I need a button that's like, I'm out. Next.
Turn the hat around backwards and that'll be the signal. Don't talk.
There you go.
All right. And then the reporting is actually a really great point. So there's a couple different paths that we're going on that because historically in Intune, the reporting was classic MDM reporting. Did we set those policies on the device correctly? And then it's pretty much stopped. There were some attempts to say, is it on the latest or current version? But it wasn't really driven off of really high quality data. So we've actually removed some of that as well because it wasn't reliable. And as we've been developing and moving and building the Windows Update for business deployment service out, one of the key elements of that has been the reporting layer of that. And so features come along with reporting. at the same time that is specific to updates and devices and gives you all the detail you need in order to be able to understand and monitor what's going on. Including what I'm really excited about is the alert framework. And so what alerts does is it takes error codes on devices and maps those to useful names. Like there's about 8 or 9 different low disk error codes in the Windows Update system, because every different component in Windows Update can throw out a different error code when it runs out of disk space. And so that's been mapped to a single alert called low disk. And then what we do is we also associate a description of what that issue is, low disk not being the most difficult one to figure out, but there's others that are more confusing where description is very helpful, as well as a recommendation for how to potentially remediate or fix that issue. The other thing that's really cool about alerts is that we can pull in things like safeguard holds, which aren't device error codes, or look at other data and telemetry from devices and provide other information about why a device is not successfully updating. For example, one that we introduced last year, insufficient update connectivity, looks at device heartbeats since the update was made available. And if the device doesn't have enough connected available uptime, will actually then provide an alert so that you know that that device may be turned off or may be barely on and isn't on sufficiently to be able to successfully do the update. And those are very difficult devices to solve, but they're awesome to know, because now you can potentially filter those out or reach out to those customers, say, please turn that device on to get updated. So alerts are another really key part of that reporting framework. As we've been building and transitioning from a pure client-based WFBI to one that combines client-based settings with cloud-based controls, and been building the reporting out along with that. So expedited level of reporting in Intune. Drivers, as I mentioned, is coming along with that. The next big thing we expect to work on is probably going to be something like quality updates and similar stuff in Intune. In the meantime, or as another parallel option, WFBI offers WFBI reports. It's an Azure service that you can sign up for and enroll your tenant, and then that gives WFBI permission to collect the device data and provide the reporting for you in the Azure portal. That is providing the current quality update and feature update status of every device, shows you ones that are more than 1 or 2 quality updates out of date, for example, includes the alerts as well. And so that's not in the Intune portal, but it's still available as an Azure service that allows you to get reporting on all the devices in your tenant today. Because it's built off of log analytics, raw data is also available in tables in log analytics, so you can customize those workbook reports, or you can create your own, or you can query it directly with the Custo query language. Really powerful stuff and really flexible. So together, we're bringing all that together. The data from WFBI reports, the processors are starting to flow into Intune as well to drive our reports. So we're getting a single source of information for device update status that will be in the Intune portal as well as in the Azure portal. And that's a key part of our strategy in enhancing WFBI, is to also bring that reporting along with all that query capability that you're used to in a config manager environment.
Speaking of WFBI, is that WFBI the dog barking I hear?
With that on mind.
That was such a great dad joke. Thank you, David. We have a new question from Chad. What is possible, if anything, if our BIOS updates require a BIOS password right now?
Yeah, that's a very, very common question with drivers and firmware updates. And so the answer is that when drivers are published through Windows Update, there's a mechanism that that OEMs are supposed to follow. I've only heard of 1 or 2 cases where we found one that didn't, and that's a bug. But when they follow that process, they're able to go through a secure system in Windows, because that driver was delivered securely through Windows Update, and not require the BIOS password. So there's a whole mechanism that can be connected to that nearly all OEMs and BIOS updates are doing today. We have about 50 customers in our private preview. I think I only heard about 1 or 2 that did not do that. And then when that happens, provide feedback back to the OEM and say, hey, I'm using this cool, awesome management system, but your driver isn't working well with it. Can you please fix that up so that we can deploy this to our devices? Otherwise, they're just not going to get your BIOS update.
We have a question from Twitter. Sorry if this is a dumb question. There are no dumb questions, Twitter user. Is Windows Update for Business something I have to sign up for?
I would agree. There are no dumb questions. There's just really bad documentation. Which you may or may not have. But so Windows Update for Business is really just an umbrella term that means the group policies in the Windows Update node, the CSPs or configuration service provider policies that are serviced by MDMs like Intune, and the Graph API capabilities that allow you to control offering. When we're talking about it, all of those things are really just designed to do 2 things. Manage which updates are offered when, and manage the update experience once you get them. By default, every device is just scanning against the Windows Update endpoint, getting the consumer experience. To use Windows Update for Business, all you do is configure group policies, CSPs, or the Graph API to manage what that experience looks like for those devices. And you could consider that a type of signing up, just in this case, configuring policies.
Thanks, Aria.
David's dog agrees, don't worry.
Okay, next question. Warning. This is a question about reporting. Does the commercial ID still need to be set for Windows Update for Business reports? Only our older computers, once set up for Windows Update compliance, seem to be reporting in. The commercial ID is not mentioned in the new documentation.
That's a good question.
So when the commercial ID is not required for WFB reports today. There is some configuration that's required. I was trying to look up the documentation because I don't know if some of the things I know are pre-release issues or not. But there is a sign up that you do in the Microsoft Admin Center that signs up your tenant for WFB reports, and then all devices at that point should be reporting in once they've had a chance to sync up and get that information. So the commercial ID is essentially left over from the old update compliance and is not required. And I don't think that anything else is required on the client, but that's the thing I was trying to double check real quick.
AADJ is required. You have to be Azure Active Directory joined.
That is definitely a prereq.
And more information at the bottom of the screen. aka.ms-whoopyourreports.ga.
That's the one I was looking for. Nice find.
To be fair, the amazing people behind the scene found it, not me. But Heather and folks appreciate your appreciation.
We have another question, and forgive me if it's been asked already. Oh, okay. What do driver rings configured with Intune look like? Is this the feature deferral days setting?
Great question. So when you create a driver policy, each driver policy will have its own deferral option available. And so when drivers are automatically approved, if you choose an automatic approval policy as opposed to a manual approval policy, you can specify the deferral. So it'll be unique and specific to the drivers in that policy. So you don't have to use, or you wouldn't want to use the quality update or feature update deferrals in the update ring settings.
Keep the questions coming, everyone. Okay, question from Jens. Our company have a policy which do not allow Microsoft Store download to be available. It can open the store but not download. This is configured with group policy, the same policy with which disable Windows Update as we use WSUS for this. However, we do have a test group policy where we can assign a PC and it gets access to MS Store updating and downloading. But I'm looking for a better configuration for this. The MS Store should automatically download all updates to the apps, which is a part of Windows, like calendar, sticky notes, etc. But the user should not be able to download any other apps. Is this possible with group policy? If it is, how?
This is a great question. So I can 100% say the automatic download and updates of all apps that are being managed through Store but are natively available should be possible via Store. The part that I'll need to follow up on and can hopefully share an answer after this is how you would stop the download of other apps. I believe there's a way to lock this down, but I need to double check what that way is. And if it's available via GP or also via CSP. Sir Danny, do you know by chance? Nope. Okay. Well, that was a good grimace.
And well, I mean, it gets. This goes back to kind of what I was talking about earlier. Like you start mixing GP with MDM and cloud, and things get really messy really fast. So, is there a way with GP? Possibly, but I think your better question is that really what I'm trying to achieve? Is the thing in front of your face the thing you're trying to achieve, or is it the thing you need to achieve later? Sorry, it's not really that's not the answer you want, but I think it's still the right answer. So I guess just going with that while we're waiting on some questions. So going back to how customers go from that traditional to legacy, traditional to modern. How would you guide somebody, David, Aria, like if you met a customer tomorrow, walked into a customer environment, they tell you kind of exactly what I was telling you earlier. We've tried this, we need more of this doesn't work. Like what are some key things you guys bring up to get them to think about?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things I've been seeing a lot is customers who've traditionally been on-prem shops, who are almost all AD joined, they're on-prem, and they're really looking at two things. They're looking to, one, how do I move to the cloud and using Intune? And two, how do I move to Windows 11? And what's really interesting is to see how they're planning these deployments. And they're leveraging that move to the cloud and the move to 11 together, and the move to 11 as their main test pilot for the cloud. And the way that I see them doing it is one of two ways. Either starting with new devices. So if they get new devices, have those devices be AAD joined, use Autopilot to set up those devices and provision them, and have them be cloud only. Meaning, hey, these are the first devices we're provisioning in this way, they're Intune only from the get-go. And so that's one approach I've seen people take, is they're just doing it through their typical device transition. The other thing I've seen people do is really what you're talking about, which is the more complicated part of moving either from Configman or some third party on-prem to the cloud. And that's challenging, whether that's starting with the scan source policies to move one update type for Windows over at a time, or whether that's starting with things that aren't update, moving that to the cloud, whether it's for the security aspects that come with it, or whether it's for some of the other capabilities, and doing that in pieces. I will say that approach is a bit more challenging because then you're maintaining the dual infrastructure. But I've seen them do that as well, especially for companies who have maybe large server environments, and therefore you kind of want to maintain the config man anyway. So it's less of a burden for them to keep both. But the biggest things that I've seen is when you do that transition, flip all of your sliders to, hey, moving my update workload to the cloud. Hit pause feature updates or use target version. Keep it there for 24 to 48 hours. Then you can remove pause or target version if you're using the feature update deployments capability using the Graph API to control what's offered when. go to each of those devices, wipe the registry key hive of all of the group policy settings. We tell you where they are, and then also go and make sure that nothing is set to resetting them. And this is something where we know we need better documentation around this, or maybe videos showing you how to do this and the complexities around that. But it's really, yes, step 1, new devices. Step 2, move old devices, make sure GP is wiped, and also recognize it's not a one-to-one. We've been doing an amazing job moving all of the group policy stuff to the settings catalog in Intune, but it is not one-to-one. You don't want to just take your existing group policies for Windows Update and be like, these are good, I'm going to keep them.
Yep.
Use this as an opportunity to realize how much updates have been improved since Windows 7 and go and reset and say, hey, what do I really need to be setting for my one-to-one PCs? What do I need to be setting for the kiosks? What do I want to be setting for these? And if you don't want to read that blog, you can actually leverage AutoPatch now to actually have those policies set on your behalf. And so there's all of these things available to you. And we will hopefully be providing even better guidance on that in the future. What did I miss, David, Danny? Steve's phone.
Dave, you're on mute.
Great.
I can't hear the dogs, Dave. Come on, come off mute. There we go. There we
go. So much for keyboard shortcuts. So there were just 2 things I think I'm going to reiterate or strengthen, build on what you were saying. One of the key things is as you move to the cloud, your mindset should be a little bit more around letting Windows Update do what it does best with using as much of the defaults as possible. One of the key changes is, in the config manager WSUS world, a lot of organizations really wanted to control exactly when devices scanned for updates. And they're looking for exactly those settings. They're actually kind of there, but they're definitely not the recommended approach in Windows 10. And active hours has come such a long way from when it was first implemented. And it's become a very refined experience for enabling end users to choose their working hours on the device and to have Windows updates operate outside of those hours, as well as detecting when those users may be doing something unusual. They have a late night work session or whatever the case may be. And so letting the system and letting Windows handle that on a per user basis by letting defaults go be on the device is a really great way to go, and provides a better user experience while not losing really good control over which updates are going which devices and when. Yep. So that's just one good category of mindset change to have. The other key thing is if you're going to do that transition from on-prem to the cloud, one of the big things that I've been advising customers with and seen is make sure you have your cloud policies configured and ready to go before you flip the switch and move them to be cloud managed. If you move the switch and then go to configure the policies, you actually leave your devices for a short period of time, or depending how long it takes you, a period of time where the device is essentially unmanaged. And what Windows will do, we'll get that device as current as we can from Microsoft's definition of the latest updates that are available, be that feature updates or quality updates. And that may come to a surprise if that happens. And then you then apply the policies after the devices have been moved to the cloud. So configure those policies in advance. They won't take effect if you're using like the code management sliders until you actually move that device in the pilot group or you move the slider over. But they'll be ready so that when that device does move over, they're in a managed state. And those were the 2 things I was thinking of adding on.
That's really good feedback. And I guess one of the things I call out is Aria, you nailed it with the whole one-to-one. Or Dave, I don't know which one of y'all said. It's like the one-to-one configuration. I have this particular setting and I need this. Well, I don't know. Like when I'm talking with customers, whatever hat I'm wearing, I also try to figure out what hat they're wearing because the IT pro thinks different than the manager thinks different than the director. So when I'm having those conversations, it helps to understand your audience because the response you need is going to be dictated towards whatever their agenda is for that role.
We call that the value pyramid.
Spot on. All right, I see we got some more questions, y'all. Go ahead, go for it.
So we have a question from David. I have our update rings for Windows devices configured in Intune. Our policy has a grace period of 5 days and the option auto reboot before deadline set to yes. I expected the machines would be forced to restart. Most of them do that. On Microsoft Defender console, I can see that the update wasn't installed and the machine is tagged pending restart, which means that the restart probably did not occur. Shouldn't Intune policy force the restart? Are there issues here?
Great question. David, I didn't know you were magic, though, in both answering questions and planting them in the audience. So that's good. So, yes, this policy works as you're describing it. Now, things that could cause the device to not restart within that period is, let's say the device has just been off and the person's on vacation. That device is off. It's not going to restart. The other big things there are going to be around if the device didn't actually scan and get the update until way later because the person was off and on vacation, they'll still have 5 days to take that update from after scanning it. Even if you originally pushed it today, a month from now, the device came online, they would have 5 days to do that restart. Additionally, I'm not actually sure if your main goal there in the Defender console is just looking at MDE, which is the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, or which is delivered as part of the LCU, or if you're talking about Microsoft Defender Antivirus. For Microsoft Defender Antivirus, it is shipped via the store, I believe, and updated that way. So you might also see differences in the update depending on which of those you're actually monitoring.
Thanks, Aria.
But there are no known issues with that.
Okay, no known issues. Question from Sean. The new WFB reporting is great and provides good information, but the data is only updated once a day. We sometimes need to report back on patch compliant multiple times a day when there's a 0-day vulnerability. Is there a plan to allow more frequent reporting?
Well, that is a great question and totally understand the scenario. There are times when just checking in on a daily basis is not frequent enough that you need to know more faster. In Intune, we are closer to an 8-hour window for reporting data updates. That is something that we would like to make faster. There's a lot to it to just make it go faster than just like turning up the dial. And it is something that we would love to be able to do. It's something that we're looking at, but don't have a specific plan for today, when or how that might happen.
It's just to be very clear here on the WFB report side, more data and more data processing, more money needed. And let's be very clear here, WFB reports is free. Which means giving you near real-time data, it's not going to happen. Now, what might happen is for cases where you've expedited, us only doing faster data during that period of, oh, you expedited, you might need it. So then doing faster data there. But I think that's something we need to figure out is how do we balance those of, we want to give you the data that you need, but we don't necessarily, we need to balance how those work of how do we give you what you want without also paying billions in Azure spend. And that's an exaggeration, but you get my point. And so I think that's a balance that we're investigating, and hopefully we'll come to a really good conclusion around with regard to expedite.
Okay, we have a question from loyal viewer Stefan. How can we prevent devices from restarting early in the day when users just start to work when deadline happens? Is there a way to force the reboot at the end of the deadline to avoid impacting users that haven't already scheduled their updates prior to the deadline? Who wants to take this one?
Great question. You have zero control over that today. we actually have a bunch of heuristics based on the user behavior models that determine when we show notifications, when we force the deadline, things like that. And it's based on user behavior. We can consider adjusting that and are constantly adjusting that model to provide a better experience. But I don't actually think we would necessarily do what you're suggesting. And we'd have to experiment with it. But my worry would be part of why we give you those notifications to warn you at the beginning of the day, because we're really giving you a 4-hour warning and then a 2-hour warning and then a 15-minute warning. If we gave you a 4-hour warning at 2 p.m., for example, well, then you're going to be forced at 6 p.m. when you maybe already logged off. And if your computer was left in your office unplugged, well, then we didn't actually restart you by the deadline. And so now the device is not compliant. And we're going to have to force restart you the next morning. And so that's definitely something that we can look into and try to figure out and experiment to find the best balance and experience there. Because we definitely don't want to disrupt the end users.
And just building on that, if you have enough of a grace period, one of the ways that I look at it is you've given the user the opportunity to get the device restarted. They've got notifications. They've had the ability to schedule a time that works for them. The system has tried to do the restart overnight if it can outside of active hours. There are conditions, as Aria pointed to, that prevent that from happening, and are usually really good reasons that you would totally agree with. And so the only time we end up with a forced restart is when we still haven't been able to get that device restarted. And we're taking that signal that says this is the end of the grace period as your signal to say, now's the time to make that device compliant. We've given the end user enough time to have control over that restart and to have a graceful restart, but we need to protect enterprise resources. We need to help make sure the device gets compliant so that it doesn't get blocked through conditional access or any of those solutions. And so the system then is designed to make that restart happen in order to shift that balance from end user experience towards compliance. And so the control that you do have today is to extend that grace period a little bit longer, along with educating your end users. If they're complaining that happened, then very kindly, friendly, say, we gave you this much time to try to make that happen. Please, help ensure that the device gets restarted on your schedule when it's convenient to you before you run into that deadline, which is in the dialogues as to when that's going to occur for several days before it gets there. So there's an awful lot that you can do outside of changing code in Windows.
Thanks, David. So I have a question I'm going to direct to Steve because I hear that he hears things and might be willing to share. We have a question from Aaron. Microsoft Connected Cache on the SCCM DPs is a great way for my org with limited points of egress with multiple site running on MPLS. When can we expect a public preview of a standalone MCC?
So short answer is I don't know, but I would reiterate that what Mr. Geyer said when it comes from things going into from private preview to public preview to general availability, it's more of a quality-driven process, not necessarily a schedule. Now, at the beginning of the day, did folks behind MCC want it to release quicker? I'm sure that was the case. But when you're talking about all the technologies that are being brought to the forefront here, little hints there, might want to brush up on learning containers and Linux. They know how important this is. This is a big piece of the puzzle for a lot of folks out there, especially a lot of the field folks I've been working with over the past year and a half. More than one CIO has come to me and said, there is nothing more, Steve, that I want to do than get rid of these WSUS servers. I mean, 20 years ago when I started standing up these servers and standing up WSUS, it's not because I was excited about, buying all this hardware and downloading all of, these gigabytes and gigabytes of data every month. It was about control. It was about predictability. It was about egress reduction. And so, they're going to be thrilled to get rid of all their WSUS servers and, outsource completely to WolfBee. But for a lot of folks, the other piece of that puzzle is traffic control and egress control. And, delivery optimization, and particularly the connected cache, is going to be a big part of that. So we hear you. We understand why that's important, because I hear it. You see how I kind of gave a disappointing answer, but then some insights on top of that.
Now, if only you could actually define SCCM, DPs, NPLS, and MCC, that would be beautiful for someone who does not know all of those acronyms.
Okay. So SCCM is what we used to call Config Manager, System Center Configuration Manager. It's always Config Manager. Even when it was Endpoint, even when it was Microsoft Endpoint Config Manager, to me it was always Config Manager. And I'm so glad we got rid of that acronym. But I digress. MCC is Microsoft Connected Cache. MPLS is multi-protocol layer switching. And I think I got them all. DO is delivery optimization. And DP is distribution point.
The more you know. Okay, do we want to do a little round robin final thoughts before we have to wrap up?
I'll start. It's funny, Aria, because my cousin, who's an accountant, watched one of these videos and he was like, "Man, you're speaking another language. I didn't understand a single word you said." So I make a pledge to spell out all the acronyms as much as possible in the next few shows. David?
What to say? First of all, thank you for having me. This has been kind of fun. And I always enjoy the opportunity to kind of share what we're thinking, to hear the questions, because it's a form of feedback to us, whether it sounds that way or not. We always internalize that. And then having a chance to share some of the great stuff that we're doing, and to share some of the information that hopefully will help more customers, more companies be able to make a smooth transition to the cloud using WFB. We really have a great vision for what Windows updates can be in the cloud, and I've seen a lot of progress, especially over the last couple of years, and feel really good about the direction we're headed. So stick with us. We're in the middle of a big part of a transition that has been building up these capabilities, and they're just getting better and better. So thank you for your time joining us today. Thanks for your questions, and the feedback comes along with it. And thanks for having me, Danny and Steve. And it's great to see you again, Aria.
Aria, final thoughts?
It's been amazing. Always a blast. Move to Windows 11.
We talked about a lot today, so I just encourage everybody to go try it. Try it, experiment with it, see where it fits. It does fit somewhere in your environment. It may not fit for the whole thing, definitely not day one, but it does fit. You just need to kind of go after it, put some time in it. Other than that, that's it. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you joining.
And thank you to Rochelle as well for keeping us on the rails as much as possible.
Nobody got smacked with a ruler today.
That's right. That's right. So join us next month when we talk about, or revisit rather, the Cloud Management Gateway. Speaking of Configuration Manager, it should be an interesting topic. And Danny's probably got mixed feelings about the next one, but you'll have to wait to see what we mean by that. So don't forget to tune in. And as always, on behalf of our guest, David and Aria, and my co-hosts, Danny and Rochelle, this is Steve's phone saying farewell, and always be wary of Murphy's Law when you're putting on these shows.